He told jokes about the president. Now he is the president. Comedian Volodymyr Zelensky wins a landslide victory in Ukraine's election. But with no previous political experience, how will he tackle the many challenges ahead? What's the punchline? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Imran Khan. Comedian Volodymyr Zelensky played a fictional president for years. Now he's going to play it for real. But stand-up comedy is one thing. Standing up to Russia and the myriad of other problems facing Ukraine is another thing altogether. Outgoing President Petro Poroshenko says Zelensky's too naive for hard politics. But it is dissatisfaction with old faces like Poroshenko that's probably benefited the comedian. He's campaigned on an anti-establishment, anti-corruption platform, and that seems to have resounded with his supporters. Zelensky won with more than 70% of the vote. This is what he had to say.
Зробили це разом.
We did it together. Thanks to everyone. Now there will be no pathetic speeches. I just want to say thank you.
Zelensky is going to have to deal with Ukraine's numerous challenges. Ending a 5-year war with Moscow-backed separatists in the east that's killed more than 13,000 people. Fixing a struggling economy and the government's rising debt. Following through on his promise to fight corruption and stamp out the influence of oligarchs. And also pushing through much-needed reforms. Zelensky doesn't have a proper party of his own and is likely to face stiff opposition in parliament. Let's bring in our guests. Joining me on Skype from Kiev, Valentin Yakushik, Professor of Political Science at the National University of Kiev-Mohyla Academy. From Berlin, Uli Bruckner, Jean Monnet Professor in European Studies at Stanford University, Berlin. And also on Skype from Moscow, Dmitry Babbage, Political Analyst at Rossiya Segodnya News Agency. Welcome to the program. Let's begin with Valentin Yakushik first. It's clear that the new president has significant challenges on his hands. Perhaps the most important one is to actually get some parliamentary support. He doesn't have a political party. Is there a danger he could be a lame duck president for the entire of his term if he doesn't get that support?
Definitely, the President Zelensky doesn't have support in the parliament as it is now. But Ukrainian politicians, members of parliament, they very easily change sides. So there may be quite a big group of parliamentarians who will start supporting him. We have this tradition after every election. But I think there is also a chance about which Zelensky is not talking and his team is not talking. Maybe there will be a chance to press on the existing parliament and to have early elections. He may rely not only on the parliament and not so on the parliament, but on a wide movement of ordinary people who want to get rid of corruption, of inefficiency, and who want to stop war. So there are big possibilities for a wide movement to be created if his team, if Zelensky team is smart enough. At the moment, they were trying to do everything not to show what they will be doing. Just they wanted to have power, to oust the previous president. After some time, they will have to decide how they will act. Either they will be acting just as ordinary politicians who rely on the existing law, on the procedures, and in this way they will bog down into these procedures. They will have to show something which the ordinary people would like. And getting rid of the existing parliament will be one of such important steps which they may undertake. Also, Mr. Zelensky needs some quick, successful steps. One of them is to release Ukrainian prisoners held in Russia, to make an exchange between prisoners or captives in Ukraine and in Russia. it will be great success for him. And also what he said in the beginning, he said, I want to stop shooting in the east of Ukraine. It's easily to do. Just give order to Ukrainian forces, stop shooting, and to agree with Russian supported separatists to do the same. So with these two important steps, it is possible to create a wider movement of the people and to have early elections. It's one of the possible ways from the existing stumble block.
But Zelensky, I have to say, has shied away from the media. His speech when he was declared the winner was very short. He said, there's no time for pathetic speeches. There doesn't seem to be a real manifesto.
No, and he couldn't have, because he had an appeal towards people who are in conflict with the existing authorities, creating such a situation when Ukrainians are divided in two and even more camps. So he, Mr. Zelensky, had to be accepted by all sides as a person on him they want and can rely. Well, I would use a biblical archetype for that archetype. In Genesis, it is said that the first stage when the earth was created, the earth was formless, was without form, and was void. So something like that was with Mr. Zelensky. And in this empty volume, it is possible to pour any program. So now it's important to work out a viable program. And it was necessary not only for Ukrainians, that all Ukrainians think that he is our guy, but for the international community as well. It is very important that the United States and Europe said, okay, Mr. Zelensky, you can go, you can be the president, because with the support of outside forces, it was much more easy for the president who is leaving to win. But the West took a neutral position, because for the West, it was very important that there is no destabilization. The previous authorities, they could use forged procedures, as it is a practice in the post-Soviet world everywhere, and in Ukraine in particular. But the West said, oh, we don't like to use forged procedures. And the Minister of Interior of Ukraine, Mr. Avakov, visited the United States of America, and from there he received a correct advice. Do not allow falsification. So Ukrainian elections were quite honest, were quite fair. And in this way, the situation was created that the West was looking at Mr. Zelensky as possible their ally, and Russia was not against him. So it is one of the best possible technologies to come to power when every segment.
Well, let's actually, that's quite interesting. Let's bring in the view from Moscow and Dmitry Babich. What is Moscow thinking right now?
Well, there is hope, and I agree with Valentin that certain things can be done very easily, such as stopping the shooting. There were several cases in the last 4 years since the war started in 2014, when there was no shooting and people didn't die. Right now, people die every week, sometimes every day, on the line dividing the Ukrainian army and the insurgents in the east of Ukraine. And I agree that Russia made every effort not to get involved in these elections, not to insult Mr. Zelensky. Of course, the attitude to Mr. Poroshenko in Russia is very bad, because there were several crises in our relations. After all, the war in Donbass started under him. So he is extremely unpopular, and it was basically politically impossible for President Putin to negotiate with him seriously, even to have phone calls. Even with phone calls, there were problems because Putin said that a phone conversation with him would help Poroshenko's campaign, and Putin didn't want to do it. On the other hand, of course, there will be problems, as you rightly said, because in Russia, the perception is that Mr. Zelensky will have to withstand real pressure from the West if he wants to really bring peace to Ukraine. Valentin rightly said just recently that it was from Washington that the so-called advice to have honest election came to the Interior Minister, Arsen Avakov. You know, in a really independent country, you don't need advice from other countries, especially such faraway countries as the United States, to have a normal election. So I would say Moscow's position is we will negotiate with anyone whom the Ukrainian people elected. I'm quoting our Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev right now. We hope that the shooting will stop, and from there we can proceed further.
Let's bring Berlin here and Uli Bruckner. Uli, it seems to be quite a positive reaction from both Russia and within Ukraine itself. Within Ukraine itself, it's clearly time for a change. Moscow is keeping its mind open, seemingly. What's the European reaction, do you think?
Well, it sounds very similar because there's no reason from the European Union side or from the heads of state or government in the member states to not give any credit to the newly elected president, because as it sounds today, it looked like very open and fair elections from what we know. And if there's such a landslide victory with over 70% of the votes, the person is legitimate, and we can only wait and see what he actually delivers. Given the fact that he hasn't really said much in the campaign, this is just a speculative game, but generally speaking, he's pro-West. That's what he said. What he actually is going to do is open for speculation, as I said.
Let's bring in Valentin back in here. Here is a man that hasn't really set out strong policy agendas, but he has swept to power because people clearly in Ukraine want a change. At some point, he's going to have to build bridges. He's going to have to really reach out to people and make some decisions that are going to be unpopular with the current political establishment, but may well play very well with the people of Ukraine. Does he really have the people on his side? I mean, the elections were very clear. The people wanted a change, but did they know what they were voting for?
People were voting in their dream. And Mr. Zelensky created this dream by playing in a movie, in a series. But, you know, in fact, he's absolutely not prepared for such a role as real president of Ukraine. And now, because he has education as a lawyer, but it's formal education, and he doesn't have experience at all. A lot will depend upon the team with which he will be working together. And now it seems that he has an illusion that he can create a team of young, unknown to the public people, clean, young. So it reminds me something what Mr. Saakashvili was doing in Georgia when first he came to power. And when he cut from power all people who were older than 40 years old. It's a way to nowhere. He needs to use experienced politicians, experienced experts. And gradually, I think it will be combination of two policies. One, using new people who are his team and involving experienced people. Also making compromises with the existing political forces. I think he needs to have a compromise with one of the former leader of Ukrainian security service who was taking part in the elections, with former minister of defense who are willing to support him, and maybe even with Yulia Tymoshenko, one leader of one of the most powerful populistic political parties. So that will be first stage when Mr. Zelensky is creating his team, either going one way, young people, new illusions, and then stopping, because he will be destroyed by the opposition, by his competitors, or he cooperates with some part of Ukrainian traditional political class. That is a kind of policies which he will pursue. And also in international arena, now he creates the image that he is a person who is pursuing Mr. Obama, Mrs. Clinton's and George Soros policies. Among his advisors, there are many people who are called here children of Mr. Soros. They have already experience in running many countries in the post-Soviet world, and it was not a success. Oh, by the way, there was yesterday in the first interview of the future first lady of the wife of Mr. Zelensky. She said, when she was asked with whom you would rather meet, what first lady, or Mrs. Trump or Mrs. Obama, she said, oh, I would rather meet with Mrs. Obama. I like her more. It was a big mistake, diplomatic mistake, practical mistake, but it may be showing that the connections with the traditional Democrats, with the former American administration, are stronger than with the other side. But if they
let's bring in Dmitry
themselves...
Babic here. Dmitry, you've been listening to what Valentin Yakushik had to say, that there may be some naivety within this new administration, that they may not know how to play the politics of it. Does this work to the advantage of Russia? Might they be able to manipulate Zelensky simply because he doesn't know what he's doing?
Well, as usual, Russia is always suspected of the worst of intentions, even though I don't think it's the case here, because Russia is interested in the situation in Ukraine basically improving and coming down, because it's our large Slavic neighbor. Millions, tens of millions of Russians have family members in Ukraine. And I would like to remind you, I will only be giving you facts here. After the so-called peaceful revolution in 2014, during which 38 policemen were killed, we heard that the new government ousted Mr. Yanukovych and killed so many people precisely because now there will be no corruption, there will be new people, young people who will bring Western practices. And what was the result? The result was that the Ukrainian economy shrank 7% in the first year, 10% in the second year. Now, 78% of the Ukrainians say that the country is moving in the wrong direction. Okay, you can blame Russia for that, but maybe at least part of the blame is with the West, because basically it was the European Union that refused to have trilateral negotiations on the association agreement with Ukraine in 2013, when President Yanukovych suggested let's resolve our differences by having trilateral negotiations, Russia, Ukraine, and the European Union. So in Russia, we all wish success to Mr. Zelensky, not because we share all of his opinions. I think Valentin very well described his political position. He is a man of Soros. He is a man of ultra-liberals. He is surrounded by the people whom Poroshenko fired 3 years ago, the so-called foreign specialists, the Lithuanian banker Abramovichus, formerly the economy minister of Ukraine, who was ousted by Poroshenko after about 2 years in power. Daniluk, the former finance minister who worked with Western banks, they're all now in Zelensky's team. But we still hope for the better, because the current situation is awful. There is almost no dialogue between us. The diplomatic relations are in fact almost non-existent. Under Poroshenko, they talked not only about stopping the air traffic between Moscow and Kiev, but also cutting the railroads, cutting the railway traffic, which is a tragedy because, as I told you, tens of millions of families have family members on both sides of the border.
Let's bring in Yuli Brokner here. Yuli, you've heard what Dmitry had to say about the European Union there and the fact that they may have been a hindrance in previous years to the Ukrainian government. What are your thoughts about that? Is it time for the European Union to step up and really get involved in Ukraine?
Well, the European Union is involved in Ukraine, and it strongly supports the Western path in the modernization strategy of the previous governments and presidents. What is wishful thinking is the idea that with a new president, the country could easily meet the so-called Copenhagen criteria to guide the country into a full membership. this would require so many more steps that we certainly don't see anything like this happening in the term of this president, most likely of the following ones. So if people just hope that things would get better by the fact that he says he wants to get more Western, it fully depends on who his team is, who his advisors are, and how he addresses all the high-flying hopes that he created. We still don't know in what direction this is moving. He says it's Western, but there's not much the European Union can do other than supporting the government with money, with expertise, with guidance. What the country needs to do is to do its own reforms and not wait until the European Union takes it over, which will certainly not happen.
Valentin, you heard Uli Bruckner there. He used the words wishful thinking, that this may well just be pie-in-the-sky thinking. That actually the real politic, dealing with the Ukrainian hardliners when it comes to Russia, dealing with the relationship with Russia, any kind of compromise with Russia may well be seen by the hardliners as giving into the Russians. He's got a challenge on his hands, hasn't he?
You see, but there is an objective situation in Ukraine. It doesn't depend upon to what camp you belong, to the Poroshenko or to Zelensky. Ukraine will have to find way out of the war in the east of Ukraine. And I would say that even if Poroshenko had won, he would have to have negotiations on resolving this issue. This is very important issue, to resolve the war in the east of Ukraine.
Is that the overarching issue? Is it simply that's what needs to be sorted out first?
Yeah, but you said about hardliners. We have hardliners, ethnic nationalists. We have even neo-Nazi groups. And you see what is interesting? Everybody, both Poroshenko and Zelensky, will have to get rid of the right-wing extreme nationalists. So we will have to overcome the period where there was fear, when there was censorship in Ukrainian TV, in Ukrainian press. Now, people feel liberty. They are ready to speak out what they think. And it is a very important step forward. Later, we will have to see the competition between different teams, different tendencies, who will try to influence Mr. Zelensky. And here it will be very important to have a very positive sign from the West. You see what happened? Mr. Kurt...
I'm sorry, Valentin, we are running out of time, and I do want to come to our other guests first, but you raise a very important point. Let me begin with you just very quickly, Dmitry, in Moscow. The Russian relationship, that seems to be very crucial, very clear. Is Russia open for business with this Ukrainian administration? Will it want to do business?
Well, absolutely, it will want to do business, especially if Valentin is right and if Mr. Zelensky takes measures to rein in the extremist Ukrainian nationalists. That will be applauded in Russia. Please note that this censorship that Valentin described, it was not under Yanukovych. It was under the new government that the extremist nationalists indeed appointed and dismissed the heads of television, indulged in violence sometimes, pressuring newspapers and TV channels. We saw it in the Ukrainian media. We basically speak a very similar language here, and half of the media in Ukraine are in Russian. So we follow the political situation there very closely, and with huge sense of sadness, when we see the actions of extremist nationalists. So if Mr. Zelensky reins in extremist nationalists, he will be applauded in Russia, and Russia will make every concession, every possible move to improve relations with Ukraine.
Certainly a challenge. Thank you to all our guests, Valentin Yakushik, Uli Bruckner and Dmitry Babic, and thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here, bye for now.